heaven, we're so thankful for this beautiful... All right, Exodus 32. Exodus 32. We are still at the golden calf. Some good stuff here. I hope you're enjoying it. We're going to be moving on. We only got a few weeks left at our study, but it is such a significant event and story. And we've been talking about it from 4 perspectives. We've looked at it from Israel's perspective. How could they? Right? Well, we talked about how could they. How could you? How can I create golden calves? Whoa, Robert, I don't do that. No, we do that. We turn to things to put our hope and trust and faith in when times are hard and we're scared and we don't know what to do and we got to do something and they were scared and where's God? Where's Moses? And we need a God to go before us and we need a military deliverer and we do the same stuff. And so then we talked about Aaron. How could he? Well, he's weak. He's not strong. He's inexperienced. He fails. He's scared. He thinks maybe compromise will be the best solution. Well, then we get to Moses. What's Moses' test? Well, we kind of talked about it. God tells him, I'm going to destroy them and start over with you. It's a test. Now, God is certainly in his anger, but we're going to see that as we tie into chapter 33 and 34 when Moses will meet God and see his glory. Does Moses have an ego? No, he's willing to intercede for the people, and become like a type of Christ figure. We know that ultimately it is pointing to the reality of Christ. God says, I'll raise up a prophet like Moses. And that would be Deuteronomy 18. That would be speaking ultimately about Jesus. And so Moses will intercede. What kind of a leader is he? He's willing to make sacrifice for the people. He's even going to say, we'll touch on, blot my name out of the book of life, Lord. So Moses passes the test. And then there's God. We're going to, what will he do when they break his covenant? Will he stay faithful? Will he continue on? And so we're gonna see that here as well. All right, so Moses intercedes for the people here, and the text tells us there. Let me see here. Lost my place here. Verse, where does it say God relented? I just changed it. I'm trying to find that back verse now. 14, thank you. I was way down in the chapter. I was like, no, it's not that far. Then God relented. God changed his mind. Old translation, someone will say God repented. Don't let that trip you up. It's an anthropomorphic way of kind of describing God in human terms. That from Moses' perspective, God has changed. We understand God is the eternal God, and he knows everything before it's going to happen. And so it's seeing it from Moses' perspective as he views God. That's when you have these encounters with God in the Bible, and they describe from their perspective, and God will appear as a human or at least take on human forms. And so it's another one of these ideas here. Moses has passed the test. That's what this is ultimately going to be for Moses. And so Moses intercedes for the people and is successful. God changes. That is, when we respond to God, God will respond to what we do, and He knows that. And so anyway, God is going to then give some consequences. So we kind of talked about that. Moses intercedes, reminds God about, hey, if you destroy them, you bring them out here. What are you going to do? They're going to mock you. The Egyptians will mock you. Remember the covenant. And so he never makes the case here. I don't know if I pointed this out last week. He never makes the case for the people being so good. But so, he's like, they're not good here. And so, but he's saying, God, you've saved them. What will Egypt think? Remember the covenant that you made. Will God be faithful when his people are not faithful? Yes, he will. And so, all right, we're going to look at these consequences. And we'll start here. Moses, it's interesting here in this section. There's 10 verbs. Let me see here. Did I not get that up there? Well, I guess I didn't. But basically, listen to these 10 these 10 verbs that it'll say Moses came, saw, burned, threw, broke, took, burned, grounded, scattered, and made. He takes action, doesn't he? He's going to take immediate action. The funny thing is, he's when God says he's going to wipe them out, Moses hasn't seen what they're doing yet, has he? He's up on the mountain. God's telling him. When he comes down and sees it, they get a little closer, and Joshua's like, looks like they're having and and Moses sees it. He's going to lose it himself. His anger is going to burn, and his reaction here is going to shift, and there's going to be consequences. Let's go ahead and Well, we've read this. I was trying to think if we want to. Let's go ahead and somebody get 19 through 21, Exodus 32. Who's got that? Okay, Ron, read that for us. Exodus 32, 19 through 21. Okay. We're going to see 4 consequences here that's going to happen. This is the first one. But let's just start there for a second. God's not going to destroy them. So God's going to give mercy. But they're going to have consequences. Why? What's the deal with why are there still consequences? What do we think about that just in general? There's always consequences for your actions? Okay, yeah, I want them to remember this, right? This is going to be for generations, for their children's children to remember this. Yeah. What else? Why consequences? Don't learn without them? Yeah. Anything come to mind? Why the consequences? God is holy, right? And even though God is justifier, Romans 3:24 through 26 says, He's also just. And God could not overlook sin. He can't be God and overlook sin. And so He's just, but He's justifier. And so there has to be, a penalty for sin. There's consequences to sin. Someone talked about that. The principle of reaping and sowing, right? And God will not, the rule, the order, the way things are, God will not stop the sowing and the reaping. If you sow, He's going to allow the reaping. And He doesn't stop what's planted. He's not going to go in and so there's consequences. And parents, we know that, right? It's important, right? That a child experience the consequences. They can be forgiven. I still love you, and no matter what, I love you. But there's consequences, right? We understand how important that is. Any other thoughts on that, or the consequences that makes you think about? Well, this first one's kind of weird, isn't it? What's He do? Takes this gold. Has them what? Do what? Right. Burn it to, what's he described there? Down to powder. And he scattered in their drinking water. And he made them drink it. Kind of, what's going on there? What do you think? Anything come to mind there that there's not I don't think a right or wrong, or what do you think? Why this consequence? Why is that what's God? Yeah. God destroyed it just like that, right? And yet, how do you think what did they bring? Remember, they went and got all the what? Jewelry, gold, the most what? Precious, and now they're going to watch that what? Be burned up. I've heard of these stories. I've seen these, where maybe a parent takes something of a kid, especially older, and they either sell it or maybe they dismantle it or destroy it. I don't know. I saw years ago there was a video of a father that shot up his kid's laptop or something because what he was, and I remember the outcry, that the culture had. Thought it was kind of good. It wasn't a bad idea. You want to do bad stuff with this? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to destroy it. there's country folks. He went out there and the dad just shot the, and again, some of the media, threatening your child with violence, all that stuff that kind of, and I don't know if you've taken some drastic measures with your kids, grandkids. I suspect some of you have. Because you're trying to get across, right? And God's trying to get across. Moses we don't get the direct statement that God told Moses to do this, by the way. I mean, that's, you can go either way on that. He's going to get down here and say, as the Lord directed, we're going to see in just a moment, because the consequences, by the way, the consequences are going to get progressively worse. But so we're just getting started. And maybe you've done that as a parent. Oh, this is just consequence number one, punishment. Right? There's others that are going to come. And this is the first one. And God, Moses shows them what their God that they made, that he's nothing. Melts it down, throws it in the water. This is what you left me for? The idea? This is what you left me for? And again, Ron mentions, this was precious, this gold. And that tells us also that sin is costly, isn't it? It's costly. It's not cheap. Sin may cost what? Us what? Monetarily, right? You ever seen that? Where someone's sin causes them to lose what? Maybe their job, their home, their livelihood, their possessions. You ever seen that? Where someone loses their home, their car, because of sin, right? What other costs? What other maybe examples with? Okay, relationships, freedom. Yeah, we lock you up, put you in prison. Peace of mind. How about your health? Again, God's not going to stop the planting. You reap, you will sow. And so sin is costly. And sin affects other people too, doesn't it? What's Paul say? A little bit of leaven, what? Leaven's a whole. Whoa. And so the effects of this impacts other people. And again, there's no indication that God made Moses do this, so we don't know if this is just Moses. I kind of think it's just Moses personally, because Moses comes down the mountain and he is livid when he sees it. And I think he's just kind of like, oh, here's a bottle of water, drink it. Here you go. You want your idol? We would say that. You made your bed, what? Now you're going to lie in it. You ever done that? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So punishment number one, right? Whew, is that it? No, that's not it. It's going to get worse. Let's look at 26 through 28. Who's going to read that for me? Okay, Kathy. Okay, consequence number two. I told you it's going to get worse. Pretty brutal, isn't it? So now we get the Lord. That's why I said, is the first one Moses? Is this all Moses on consequence number one? Because you read here in verse 26 now the instruction that the Lord gives him this instruction. And so here you're going to have this brutal killing of these, that totals number 3,000. That's a real interesting number. Now, if Israel is about 1.5 million, 2 million, somewhere in there, 3,000 is not very much. So you've got a couple of possibilities maybe. Number one, there's speculation that these are the leaders, the ringleaders. Who came to Aaron, right? The leaders of the community, of the tribes. Then you back up and you get verse 25. This is another option. Moses saw the people running wild. We talked about that, right? What kind of running wild that was. Gross immorality, sexual immorality. Aaron let them get out of control. They became the laughingstock. So maybe these are the number of people that are doing this, possibly. I mean, so you've got, it's an interesting number, 3,000. Is it the leaders? Is it the actual people that are still doing this when Moses gets down there? I'm not sure. Any thoughts on that? Any other possibilities that you think about? You think about these 3,000? Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and jump in that. So look, what's he saying in verse 26? So Moses stood at the camp and said what? Who's with God? Come forward. Israel. Nobody comes forward. How sad. Except who? Levites. Now, it's possible, and I think it's good indication, family sticks by family. What tribe is Moses from and Aaron from? Levi. But, you know, it may not be that. But the tribe of the Levites are the ones who rallied to him. They came to him, and therefore they're now going to become consecrated. They're going to be set apart as the priestly tribe here. And so you have the Levites who are going to... now here's the thing. Here's what's interesting. He's going to tell them to step forward. Who's on the Lord's side? He doesn't tell them what they're about to do, does he, first? All right, who's with God? Who's with the Lord? Step forward. The Levites step forward. All right, what are we going to do, Moses? You're going to kill your people. Some of your people. The text is very clear that this is going to involve what? As they're going to strap the sword to their side, they're going to go from the gate to gate. They're going to go back and forth through the camp, killing what? My text says, what's your text say in verse 27? The end. I can't imagine. Can't imagine that. This is one of those passages, of course, that people, critics, skeptics of the Bible like to, you know, how could God do this? How could God command such a brutal act here in asking these men to do this here? Well, what about sin? What have we said about sin? Go ahead, Jeff. Okay. Yeah. That's why I probably take the view that it's probably the leaders that they're doing this to. Somehow, God indicated which 3,000 they needed to slaughter and kill. So again, we don't get the description of how this actually played out. We get the general, what they did was go through the camp, tent by tent, and killed the ones. I kind of think they were the leaders, the ringleaders, because I think there was a lot of people who got swept up in this. But regardless, how serious is sin? What does sin do to us as people, humanity? Yeah. Separates us from God ultimately, but even in this life, it is destructive, right? I mean, what does it do to our world? What is it doing to our culture, right? It's what? It's destroying us. I mean, what are they doing out there every day in America, in our cities, in our communities? They are destroying themselves with sin. Do you watch, like Maggie said a while back, I don't even like to watch the news sometimes. I was like, why don't you watch, she used to always watch the morning shows on Channel 6. You don't watch anymore. She said, I just get, somebody was murdered, somebody was raped, somebody was, every morning it's what? Same thing. What is that? What are you watching when we watch that? The result of what? Sin doing what? Having its way. And it just continues. By the way, Jesus, even though he spoke hyperbole, if your right arm causes you to, what? Do whatever you need to do to deal with what? To deal with sin. You need to do what with sin? Cut it off. You need to remove it. And it's, and then I think about this. I was thinking about a couple of applications with this, thought about that passage. I thought about Matthew 10, 32 and following. Do not think I've come to bring peace. Now again, he did come to bring peace. So we could talk about what he's saying, what he's not saying. But in coming, Jesus knew a result, a consequence of his coming would be many people would reject him. And so Jesus says, don't think I've come to bring peace. I've come to bring a what? A sword. That a man's enemy will be what? In his own family. A mother will be what? Against her daughter. A daughter will be what? Come on now. Her mother. It's one of the most strongest passages. There's another passage that says the same thing. Jesus says, if you have to love me more than mother, father. And he'll say you have to hate. And the idea there is love less. But here in that passage, he says, a man's enemies will be in his own household. Well, what's going to happen in the early church as that played out? What Jews are going to be what? Literally in families, some are going to what? Accept Christ. Others are going to what? Reject. And they're going to, brother, sisters, families are going to be what? Turned against each other. And so you have that here with the Levites. Who's with the Lord? We're with the Lord. What are we going to do? You're going to slaughter your own people, some of your own people. And so a question for us is, where's my allegiance? Where's my allegiance? Where is it at? As in my life, in my family. And I can't imagine. By the way, I would also say this. There's a lot here with this 3,000. If you say, hey, that's kind of interesting. Years later, Peter's going to stand up and he's going to pronounce the true Moses, the true lawgiver that we're to listen to, Jesus Christ. And what do you know? 3,000 are going to what? What a coincidence. I've been teaching you guys, there ain't no coincidence. They knew exactly, would make the connection to this story. Moses comes down from the mountain, and what do? They do not listen to God. And ultimately, possibly the 3,000 leaders of Israel are the ones slaughtered who reject the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of God, the law of God, Moses giving the covenant. What's going to happen? Fast forward on the day of Pentecost. By the way, how far are we? What have I said? How far are we out of Egypt? About 2 months. Pentecost. What's Pentecost? Numerically, what is that? 50. 50 days after what? After Passover, which is when God what? Saved his people. Delivered his people. And about 2 months after God did that in Egypt, what do they do at the golden calf? They turn their back on him, right? Are you putting this together? 50 days after Passover, Peter's going to stand up now and proclaim the true Moses, in essence, okay? And 3,000 are going to respond. It's incredible how the Bible kind of, you see that in just a beautiful way. And by the way, remember what he also says in that sermon? Save yourself from a crooked and what? Boy, that kind of sounds like golden calf. What were they doing? Were they perverted? Were they crooked? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly the leaders, the core people. I mean, yeah. I mean, this was whether every man, woman, child was in the present in his, sound of his voice. I don't think is necessarily the idea, but the people, the leaders, were being represented, yes, and would hear this, and certainly everybody down to the youngest child would see the consequences of what Moses had said. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, so 3,000. Any other on that? Comments, questions on Levites slaughtering, putting them swords on the side, going through the camp, killing their brothers and friends? Pretty great Sunday school material, right? Yeah, I kind of think so. So I'll talk to Bonnie if it's not in the curriculum. Christy, ladies, we need to get it in there at some point because they need to know this. They absolutely need to know this. And this is how important it is. All right, let's look at consequence number 3. What's Moses going to say? Look at Moses' response. The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." And so you get back up in verse 31. So Moses went, back up in verse 30. I should have started in 30. The next day Moses said to the people, "You've committed a great sin, but now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin." Before it was just theory, kind of in theoretical, kind of just in the abstract. The people, what they've done, and they've sinned, God tells Moses. Now Moses has seen it what? Firsthand. And he says, "Perhaps I can make atonement." So Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. But now please forgive their sin. But if not, blot me out of the book that you have written." And so Moses recognizes the severity of this is going to need a substitution. He identifies himself with the sin and says, "Put me in their place, Lord, if you won't forgive them." It's an incredible statement of Moses, of his humility and his love for the people, that he says, "Wipe my name out, blot me out." It's just... Paul, by the way, will say similar in Romans 9, won't he, and 10. He says, "I so want my fellow Jews, my countrymen to be saved. If I could," he knows he can't, so I think he's understanding that, but he says, "I would be willing to have myself blotted out, cut off, to save my people." You remember that? How much did Paul love his Jews, his fellow countrymen? Yeah. He said, "I'd give myself if I could." He knows he can't. So it's kind of an exaggeration of what you can't do. Well, if I was president of the United States, what I would, well, that's not, but or you put in some other illustration, I would do if I had all the, it's the same thing. If I could give myself, I mean, he can't. And is it Moses here, though, is, "Lord, take me." I know there needs to be an atonement for this. And of course, God's going to tell him what? No. But fast forward what? Hit the fast forward button. The true Moses is going to what? What's God going to say then? Is God going to say, "No, no, no"? Fast forward, what's God going to say? What's the world remembering this weekend a lot? God's going to put his son on a what? Cross and kill him. So Moses wants to do what he can't do because he's not God. Only God can do. God's son's going to come and do what Moses wanted to do. And again, the true Moses that God will raise up. And so this blotting out is just incredible. Any thoughts, comments, questions here? I don't want to... All right, look at the last one here real quick, 34 and 35. This is kind of where I jumped ahead. The Lord replied to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin. And the Lord struck the people with the plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made. We don't get any description or details of this. Some sort of withering disease, illness. Perhaps some people died from it. We're not sure. We don't get that kind of description. But again, what's amazing is when they were in Egypt, one of the ways God got them out of Egypt was inflicting the Egyptians and Pharaoh with what? 10 plagues. Now themselves are going to become, to receive that punishment. And so, I want to fast forward. I want to quickly get into chapter 33 real quick. I want to end on a positive note because I was thinking all week, Robert, this is depressing. So I want to give something, but it's actually a mix of good and bad. Actually, some negative, but positive. Let's look at this. Somebody read Exodus 33. 1 through 3. Who's got that for me? Okay, Marcia. Read verse 4 too, Marcia. I'm sorry, I should have had you do 4. What's interesting is the only recorded reaction, and I believe there was other reactions, but what's recorded, their reaction, we don't get it recorded when they had to drink the what? The gold that had been powdered down. I'm sure, how do you think that went down, by the way? So I'm sure, do you think there was some reactions? I think so. How about when 3,000 of their fellow family and friends were killed? Did we get a reaction? Nope. Moses blot my name out? Nope. The plague? Nope. The reaction we get in chapter 33 is what? When God says he's not going to what? Go with them. I think that's interesting. That's the bad news, but the good news is, what does God say? I'm going to send him my angel. And he's going to, you're still going to continue on the journey. Were there consequences? Yes, but there was mercy and grace and forgiveness. And so, even though we sin, the good news, the gospel news is Jesus intercedes for us. He's pleading on our behalf. Even though we may have to reap the benefits or the consequences of our sin, God forgives us. And we get to keep moving on the journey. I find it interesting here that, God is, he's not going to go with them in this sense, but he's still going to bless his people. And they're going to get to know God more in chapter 33. Moses is. And that's where we're going to kind of finish up the next couple of weeks here. Because Moses is God's going to reveal himself and who he is. And this description in chapter 33, and so we want to talk about that as well. So, like I said, there's a little bit of positive in chapter 33 here. I wanted to close a little bit on the positive that we have here, but golden calf, it's pretty important passage in the Bible. All right, we'll pick up there in chapter 33 next time.